How did you get the name Butch Miles?
I'm not sure. Um, my mother gave me a couple of different stories. When I was growing up, this is way before your time, there was a haircut that was in style called a butch cut. Basically, it was cut very short all around, but the front would stand straight up. And there was a special wax that was made that you would put on the hair, cut all the hair practically off, but then comb the front up. And that's the way I wore my hair. So maybe that was because of the butch haircut. But then she also told me that either a family friend or one of our religious leaders, what down in West Virginia, which is where I was raised, we used to call preacher man. And one of our preacher men just gave me the nickname Butch one day out of nowhere, and it stuck. The true meaning behind it and how I got it, I'll never know. I really never will. So you can make up any story you want. It's fine with me.
Oh, I love that. And your given last name, I think, is Thornton, is correct?
That's my birth name. Yes, Thornton. That was my father's name.
Oh, okay. And so Miles is
Well,
also, I'm
his
sorry?
name was Charles Judson Thornton, and I was Junior. I was Charles Judson Thornton Jr. But he and my mother separated and then divorced. And after a while, she married another man. This was Earl Miles. And they were together. I don't have any memory of him, but they separated and she raised me as a single mom. Well, my birth name was Thornton, if you're getting into it. And I was going by Butch Miles instead of Charles Judson Thornton Jr. So she went to court, I think when I was 14 years old, and had my name legally changed from Thornton to Miles.
Oh my goodness. And the Butch just stuck. I like it. I like it a lot.
It stuck and it looks better on a marquee than Charles. Appearing tonight, Charles Thornton Jr. Well, maybe if you're giving a lecture,
Right.
not on my latest book, but appearing tonight with the six-piece band, Butch Miles reads better.
For sure, for sure. That's a great way. I saw part of an interview that you'd given about wow, 25 years ago now. You spoke about your start. Were you in Arizona with a drum kit? Is that what you were talking about when you first got started?
Oh, the I know what you're talking about. That was with Monk Rowe. We did the interview in Arizona.
Oh, I see.
In between sets, I was playing at the uh, Paradise Valley Jazz Party.
Cool.
Donnie C. Miller. That was a wonderful time. I started literally playing the drum set when I was about 16 or 17. I'd taken lessons for a couple of years and things were looking pretty good. I was anxious to get into the music scene back in Charleston, West Virginia, which is where I'm originally from and where I grew up. And I joined the musicians union. I think I was 17 years old. So as far as being a so-called professional musician, Rabbi, I'm 76 now. So you take 76 and subtract 17 from it, and you get how long I've been trying to play drums and earn a living. I can't do that in my head right now. It's too early. It's not even, I don't even, well, what's the old joke? No, I can't tell you that one. But I've only had 2 cups of coffee this morning, so I'm about half awake.
I understand. Wow. And you joined an outfit and moved, is it to excuse me, to Ann Arbor for a while?
I lived in Ann Arbor for a number of years. I was with a fine group out of West Virginia, out of Charleston, the Iris Bell Trio. Later, when things got a little psychedelic oriented, and it was the age of love and the hippies and peace and all that, man, we changed our name to the Iris Bell Adventure, but kept playing pretty much the same music. We just wore different clothing and let our hair grow a little bit longer. And I was with Iris for a number of years, both in West Virginia and in Ann Arbor. We wound up playing at a wonderful nightclub slash restaurant called the Ruba Yachts, like Omar Khayyam. And that was a fine time. I think we were there for, wow, golly, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years. 7 years. It was quite a while. And then one thing after another happened, and I sort of moved on and began to pursue the rest of my career.
Well, I've read that about you, is that you've been characterized as restless and eager to see various aspects of the world and to see various places and play with different people. Would you regard yourself in that way?
I was um, quite a, as a matter of fact, I've got to go right now. Uh, like I said, it's either not enough coffee or too much coffee. I wanted to go places. I still do, actually, Rabbi. I like to go places I've never been and see what's there. First of all, you receive illumination from the experience, and you also receive education. A preconceived notion or an idea of a place and a people and uh, a way of life can be shattered inside of just a few hours if you're actually in the place with the people and the way of life. And it just is completely different from everything you've been led to believe. That's one thing about traveling. I think Mark Twain uh, had a great deal to do with that. It's a sensational education. You learn things about people and places and situations and stories that you've only been told, and many times you find out they're not exactly true like you were told. So it's kind of good to go and find out for yourself. I love to travel. My wife and I have been recently just watching the new Stanley Tucci series on HBO about Italy. And of course, if you're traveling in Italy, you have to eat. And it's basically pretty much about the history of Italy and about the food and how it's prepared, where it came from, the history of the food. And we adore Italy. We've been there a few times, and I just loved it. So we point at the TV every night and say, "Oh, we've been there. Remember when we went by there? Remember, gee, I think we ate there. Do you remember that place?" And so we've been having a wonderful time with a lot of places that we fondly remember that we would like to go back to. Same thing. We had never been there, went, loved it, and we'd like to return.
Of course. Well, God willing, before too long. Is there any place that you haven't been that you would still like to travel to?
Well, gee, that's that is a good question. Really, that is a very good question. I haven't thought about that. That I haven't traveled to. Golly. Hmm. I'm not sure. Whoa, yes. Thank you very much. And it is one of the United States. I've been to 49. I've never been to Alaska.
Wow.
I'd like to go to Alaska. As a matter of fact, we've talked about maybe doing, when we have the chance, doing one of those Alaskan cruises. We understand those are very, very popular and wonderful, but I've never been there.
Hmm.
The closest I've been is, Canada, down beneath Alaska, but I've never traveled up that far. Been pretty much everywhere else that I wanted to go.
That's wonderful. I saw a meme the other day, which you're the exception to the rule, is that after the weather that we've all had in the last couple of weeks, all the Texans are erasing Alaskan cruises from their.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Alaska, I understand, is just wonderful, but I can definitely understand. I mean, ooh, I grew up in cold weather, and as you pointed out, there was a time when I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan. There was one day in Ann Arbor I'll never forget. It was so cold, I started getting up before dawn to go out and start the car. I didn't have a garage in my humble abode, and so I would start the car every hour. By the time it was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the temperature had risen to 5 above 0, and I was out in a t-shirt. That was like, because I had been in such extreme cold, 5 above 0 felt nice to me, and it was sunny too. Let's be honest. So yeah, the cold. I really don't take cold all that well anymore, but I've been there, and I'd really rather not go back, especially everything that we've gone through in Texas in this last week. This has been some amazing things happening.
Well,
Wow.
I hope that you're in good health and your house is safe and you're robust and feeling good.
Thank you. And same to you. Yes, we are, by the way. And same to you.
Thank you very much. When I've seen footage of you playing the drums, can I call you Mr. Miles? Is that okay?
Oh, you call me Butch.
Okay. Uh, you are possessed with such joy and presence. It's like my eyes are magnetized to your playing. Could is that something that just is natural or God given, or is that something is it a philosophy? Love to hear about your philosophy or thought about approach to playing drums.
It gives me great joy, and I can't hide it. I I I react to it. There are times being on stage or being in a nightclub or just wherever, even by yourself listening to something, when I'll hear something that just fills me with joy, and I react. Whether I'm reacting in front of 10 or 20 or 30,000 people or reacting in front of my cat and nobody else is in the room, it doesn't matter. It's my experience and mine alone. So it's very hard for me to hear or do something musically that gives me such pleasure and such joy and such love and not show it. I mean, why? What's the sense in that? If there's something that just makes you so happy and so joyful, why not show that? Action reaction. The action is the music fills me with joy. My reaction is I show joy.
So I've done the math while you were talking, Butch, and it's been 59 years that you've been doing your thing.
Oh,
And is that just in, and is it as fresh in the 59th year as it was in year five?
actually, no. To tell you the absolute truth, I see things going in different directions, other directions, and it's a wonderful thing because music is not it's not static. It let me say it. It's like a river. It never stays still unless it's frozen over, as we very well can relate to that. But music is always changing direction and moving and constantly flowing. And I see it moving and flowing in other directions, which I find fascinating and I want to know more and I want to learn more. They're not the directions that I'm comfortable in. My background is somewhere very, very deep in the past. And while I see what's coming up and I love it, the musicians and the drummers and the instrumentalists and vocalists right now and uh, a little in advance of the future are of a different mind and a different technique than what I'm used to and what I perform and where my training comes from. So what I've decided is I want to sort of step aside a little bit and see what's going to happen in music and the arts. And hopefully I can learn some things from it, but I don't plan to be in the forefront anymore. My forefront is just straight ahead, hard swinging jazz that I love so much. And there's some great, great artists right now who are playing wonderful, wonderful things, which is, just to be frank, um, out of my technical range. I don't play it, and it's marvelous to see, and I can understand it, but I just don't do it. So I want to sort of step back for a while, take some time off. As a matter of fact, I've made it known that I've been teaching down at Texas State University for, wow, I don't know, 12 or 14 years or so now. And this is my last semester. I'm retiring after this semester. Uh, a lot of people are going to say, what are you going to do now? Well, I could always say I'd like to stay home and watch some more Stanley Tucci specials on Italy. But we'd like to travel if the world ever opens itself back up. And we'd like to do other things. And I'd like to experience different sensations and go different places. Like you said, places I haven't been. I've never been to Istanbul, for instance.
Hmm.
It's the culture there is fascinating. I've never been to Shanghai or to Beijing or some places like that. I'd love to go a few things and do some things that are not connected with the arts or with music or with jazz. I want to give that a chance and see what I can find out. I might go a whole different direction. I mean, how old was Colonel Sanders when he started making that chicken? You know what I mean? He had collected quite a few Social Security paychecks before he came upon those special herbs and spices. Let's be honest about that. I might, I might come across something. I might not, but I'm willing to take the adventure and see what transpires.
Which I find that to be so remarkable. I'm so taken by you picking up the kit, let's say at 16 years old, and then becoming, pursuing music as a living by the age of 17, roughly a year or two, to be able to sort of do the drums. And now, as you said, you're 76 years old and still interested in the next vista and horizon. And that curiosity has not abated in your soul. I love that.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I just heard something. My head goes 24 hours a day. I just heard a parody. I wrote something like 76 years old and I'm still alive. I don't know. Maybe I'll write some more lyrics and we'll see. I'll get back to you on that too.
Well, you need a little couple more thoughts about herbs and spices about that. Well, I love that. So what else? So I know this is obviously an interview celebrating your legacy in jazz. I'm curious, what else do you like to do besides jazz? What else? Traveling, of course, but what other maybe hobbies or interests that you have that are interesting to think about?
Movies. I love movies. I love film. I love brilliance that's put together artistically. My wife and I have been watching some wonderful, wonderful creative and artistic endeavors on television lately. And in the past, there's been a lot of film that I just absolutely adore, and I watch over and over again sometimes. And then there's some movies and or maybe television that is just atrocious, and I get as big a kick out of that sometimes. Uh, there used to be an old show on TV called, what was it? Science Fiction Theater 2000 or something, where there's one gentleman and a couple of robots and an alien was sitting in an empty movie theater watching a film, whatever the sci-fi hit of the day was, and they would trash this film. Something would happen and they were throwing one-liners back at the movie, and it was hysterical. It was really hysterical. Sometimes I love to get old films like that, which are really bad, and just talk back to the television and come up with some zingers. Let's see how you can really shred this thing and just tear it to pieces. You can get great films which are pretty bad sometimes, and you can get really bad films which have moments of greatness. But I love movies. I love film. I'm crazy about it all the way.
Fantastic. That's just looking back at your career and thinking about ways that you've both innovated and strengthened a tradition. Do you have any thoughts about some difficult moments, any challenges that you might have had, any things you would have done differently?
Um, I haven't really stayed too long on any of those. If it was something that was very, very difficult and I was able to circumvent it or to create something from it or to uh, go at it in a contest and emerge the winner, then a lot of times I'll put that on the back burner in my head and I'll leave it there so that I don't sit and ponder and saying, gee, I wonder what would have happened if I turned left instead of going right. I almost never do that. But every once in a while, it does enter my head. And gee, I think I should have played a paradiddle instead of that flat flam that I did last night in the middle of shiny stockings or something. I don't really stay there, Rabbi. I kind of just I'll tell you a story. This is part of my philosophy. Whatever you think of him, one way or the other, I think Clint Eastwood is pretty remarkable in his career. Also, he's not a bad piano player. Did you know he's a card-carrying member of Local 47 in Los Angeles?
Hmm.
And his son is a pretty fine bass player, too. So I'm going to give him that. But the story goes, and this is part of my philosophy, that Mr. Eastwood was doing a film and having a friend of his direct him instead of directing the film itself as another favor to somebody very close to him, a favor. Well, this director had a different style than Mr. Eastwood. Eastwood liked to take very few shots, and he would normally bring the films in on time or early, and usually on budget or under budget. That's just the way he worked. So he's doing this film, and the director, they finish a scene, and he calls cut. And the director says, all right, Clint, I want you to move over. We're going to move the cameras, and we're going to do this. I want to do the film from a different angle. We're going to take this, the last scene, and we're going to do it. And Eastwood said, was I in focus? The director says, what? And Mr. Eastwood says, was I in focus? The director says, yeah. And Eastwood says, well, let's move on then. I kind of think about that. If I get the job done, if things work out, if I was in focus, let's move on then. Why stay in the same spot?
I appreciate that. You know, you have encountered, and maybe I'm wrong because I haven't met them, of course, such diverse personalities in the jazz world, like of course Count Basie and David Brubeck and Benny Goodman and others. They all had, I think, different personalities. But you're just, you know, you're Butch Miles. How did you handle the various approaches to the music as you were the drummer?
I tried to find out what they wanted. If those masters weren't forthcoming with information about what they wanted with the music, I would react. Once again, there's the action reaction that I has, whereby I would react, I would hope properly, musically speaking. Sometimes they would tell me what they wanted, and I would work with that, with some of my own voice in there. But my playing with Dave Brubeck was different from my playing with Jerry Mulligan, was different from my playing with Benny Goodman, was different from my playing with Count Basie, and so on. I was told originally, the one full date that I actually did with Mr. Goodman, I was told Benny likes brushes. He doesn't do any extended endings, and he will not do anything with the drums. He won't trade fours, nothing like that. So we had a rehearsal without Mr. Goodman. That was the way it was. And then the night of the concert, he comes out. I don't know what's happening. I see him lean over to the piano player, and I could sort of read lips. And he leaned over to the great John Bunch, wonderful pianist, and he said, "What's the drummer's name?" And John said, "That's Butch Miles." And Benny stood up and smiled. And he said, "Hi, Butch." That was the only introduction I really had that, you know, with the rehearsal and everything. So everything I was told was completely wrong. He wanted to hear some sticks. He wanted some things driving. We traded fours back and forth. We had some extended endings. The entire rehearsal that I'd gone through was thrown totally out the window because that's the way he wanted it at that moment. Now, Dave, on the other hand, Dave Brubeck, we would rehearse at length. And once we had a situation settled, then we'd use that as guidelines. Not exactly, this is where we're going to play this and this is where we're going to play that. To be honest, I never knew what he was going to do. He'd change keys sometimes and go into a different tempo completely. As long as we stayed where we were, he knew where he was. He was brilliant that way, and he could do it. Jerry Mulligan would be so beautiful. He would be hard driving and tearing it up and then turn around on a dime and be just beautiful, like a breeze that had stopped blowing a gale and now was very gentle, and you could see a leaf just floating, you know, a little bit across the landscape. You had to be ready to change and to react to those changes that they would throw at you, because they wouldn't tell you what would happen. We were doing a concert once in Interlochen, Michigan, and it's a sort of an outside stage they have where the sides, there are no walls. It's just a covering over the top, and everything else is wide open right there on one of the lakes. A storm blew up as we were performing, and suddenly it was pouring the rain. We were all okay and dry and safe, but it was pouring the rain, and suddenly there was a flash of lightning, and Jerry stopped. and then a roar of thunder, and then he answered it. And then it flashed again, and he stopped, and it roared thunder. And I thought to myself, good Lord, Jerry Mulligan is trading fours with the thunder. And he was. How do you react to that? You know, that's one of the experiences, once again, that I've taken and I put in the back of my mind, and it's there. But I don't sit and pull it out all the time and say, gee, you know what happened to me one time? And if I'd done this and if I'd done that a little differently, maybe it would have come out. No, it was the experience, and I am so thankful that I was given that experience. I love it. It's there in my memory forever.
Do you ever think about writing any of these experiences down? I'll tell you what, an Alaskan cruise ship is a great place to begin to write a book.
Well, I've been thinking about. My wife has been on me, bless her heart, and she's right to do something along these lines because of the stories, like I'm telling. To do something like this for years, and I have another dear friend who recently retired from the publishing business, who has wanted me to do a drum manual, as it were, on big band drumming and playing. And he's correct, and I have friends who are willing to do that. These are some things in the back of my mind. What am I going to do when I retire and there's no place to go right off the bat, and there's nothing to do right off the bat? These are some things I'm sort of lining up. I've got 247 billion anecdotes along the lines of the Jerry Mulligan trading fours with the thunder that I would love to write down and put down, and just do something like my dear friend Bill Crow back in New York City, the secretary, one of the secretaries at Local 802, has been doing for years. He's written a couple of books, which are nothing more than stories just like that, and they are funny.
Yeah.
It's called The Band Room. He writes a monthly column for the Local 802, Union 802 press that we have. And it's a wonderful, very funny column made up of stories that he's been told by musicians over the years. And I've got quite a few of those kind of stories, and I'd like to tell some of them. So I'm thinking about doing that. And also I've got a couple of dear friends here in town and also out in LA who would like to help me with doing a drum manual about big band drumming that I'm seriously considering doing, because this is definitely a dying art. There's a number of things that I'm thinking of doing that skirt the edges of the music and the jazz and drumming, but I'm not sitting down and picking up sticks. So I think I'll give that a try. But maybe if we ever get on that Alaskan cruise, that's a very good idea.
Well, I think that's really something, and to be able to maybe your interests can all collide and you can make a film of some sort.
When drummers collide. There was an old movie years ago called When Worlds Collide.
Hmm?
It was a very bad B film, science fiction. I don't even remember who was in it. Debbie Hayes or somebody.
Hmm.
But I don't see a film. Just maybe a book, but I don't see a film. We could do a television series.
Well, I love that. I think that's a great idea. I'm going to remember your vignette of Jerry Mulligan trading fours with the Thunder for a very long time.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
I heard a story once about Wynton Marsalis performing, and one of those Nokia phones went off with that ringer, and he stopped his solo and started to emulate, and then went off on the Nokia phone solo.
Genius is genius. It's brilliant like that.
Do you have other, I certainly don't want to make this just sort of tell stories, but do you have anything else that you'd like to surface for people along that line? Any story that might stand out to you?
Oh, well, gee, here's the problem. There are so many stories that it's kind of hard to remember which ones that I'd like to pull out of the air.
Sure.
And I didn't do any preparation specifically for our Zoom today. and sat down and say, well, I think I'll tell this story, then I'll segue into this story, then I'll do that. Well, there was a time when the Basie band, we were pulling an all-nighter. The old road musicians will remember what those were. You play an engagement, then you get back on the bus at the end of the engagement, and then you go to the next town or next city overnight. You'd be driving, if you were lucky, you'd sleep on the bus, you'd change clothes, whatever you could do. We were going somewhere one night and the weather was awful. And the bus got in some trouble and we wound up in some snow and ice. And while we were waiting for some roadside assistance to help, is the world's greatest big band, the Count Basie Orchestra. I mean, the most explosive force in jazz, and use all these other wonderful, wonderful, outstanding announcements from a stage, decided to really do something about the situation we were in. So we all piled off the bus. We got out into the snow and the ice, and we had a snowball fight. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Count Basie band. Now, if you can picture that in your mind, I will give you great credit. If you can watercolor paint the scene, and frame that, that would be brilliant and wonderful. We did that for about a half an hour, and then we were able to get the bus out of there, and we spent the rest of the night in a roadside cafe waiting for the sun to come up so that some of the ice and snow wouldn't melt. But that sticks in my mind, the Count Basie band having a snowball fight in the middle of God's country, wherever we were, at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's kind of a little out of the ordinary.
I love that your stories with me this morning are nature stories. There's thunder, there's snow. I love it. I think that's great.
Thank you.
There's a clip on YouTube that I've watched for a long time, over and over, and it's Sammy Davis Jr. hosting his show with Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich, and playing. They're playing off of each other, and Sammy, who I think was a pretty fine drummer himself, was.
He was all right. He sure was.
So maybe you've seen that. Maybe you were anything. If you must have seen Gene and Buddy many times. And I don't know if you know that clip that I'm speaking of, but I thought you do. Anything that you want to share about any of that?
Well, I knew Gene and Buddy and Sammy. Buddy and I had the same type of relationship he had with Mel Torme, who was my first big name that I went on the road with Mel. It was on again, off again. Buddy and I would be dear friends. And then I'd done something that I didn't know that I'd done, and something that happened that I didn't realize had happened. And then he would barely speak to me. And then out of nowhere, we would be best friends again. It was, one of those situations. And he and Mel used to get in some really strange situations. They were such dear friends, and then they'd have a huge fight and break up. It was almost like they were married. It was amazing. But they would always, basically get back together. They were such huge talents. It was really wonderful. But yeah, one night when I was with the Basie band, I'll tell you about Buddy. One night they had somewhere, and I don't even remember where it was, maybe upstate New York, there was a big band night, a big band jazz festival. And they had all sorts of big bands on this particular night. They had the Glendale Orchestra, they had the Harry James Band, they had Buddy's band, they had us, they might have had Woody Herman's band, I'm not sure. But I remember that we got there just at the end of Harry's set, and we were going to follow Buddy. So naturally, I get myself positioned over on stage right behind the curtains where I can stare at Buddy and see everything he's doing. So he's playing, and he sees me back there behind the curtains, and he's playing some kind of a solo, whatever, just a solo on one of the tunes. And he moves all around the drum set, and with the left hand, he moves over and he starts playing single strokes on his floor tom, while his right hand just sort of like rests on the other floor tom that he used to put his towel on or his bottle of water. And he's going just with the hand while he's looking at me, and he's got this little sneer smile on his face, like, you can't do this, can you? And I'm just standing there knowing that he's just sort of like laughing at me in a certain way. And I'm absolutely in agreement with him because I can't do that. but I sure appreciated seeing him do that for whatever reason it was. But Buddy would throw things out sometimes, sort of like, "You can't do this, can you, kid?" And I would appreciate it because it was something I would learn once again, something I would hear, an education. And I would try like crazy to learn how to do that. And sometimes I could do that, but a lot slower. But I hung around with Buddy off and on a lot with Mel, and then later on uh, with just with Buddy when I was traveling, especially with Basie. And there was a lot of stories like that. With Sammy, we played with Sammy Davis one time in Florida, Miami Beach, and we had a one day. I think it was a Saturday. We were doing two shows, or it might have been Sunday. We were doing two shows at the Doral on Miami Beach. Beautiful hotel, wonderful. The funny thing was that we were in their big so-called convention center area, which held a lot of people, and the stage and whatnot, but they had no dressing rooms, which meant they brought a small trailer backstage off to the side, and that was where Sammy was, his dressing room in between some of the shows for whatever reason. And I happened to walk back after we'd done the first show, and I don't know, went out and got something to eat or whatever, and I came back early before the second show, and I walked over and I noticed that Sammy's trailer, his door was open. So I went up and I poked my head in and said, "Sam?" And he was up and moving around. He said, "Hey," he called me Sticks. He couldn't remember my name, so he just called me Sticks. That's fine. I like that. Butch Sticks Miles. He said, "Sticks, come on in." And I walked in, and his bad eye was kind of shut, the glass eye. And so he looked at me, and he's I can't even remember whether it was the right or the left, and he's going like this. And I said, "Sam, what's the matter?" He said, "Oh, I was sitting down and I fell asleep." He said, "And I woke up and I can't get my eye open, and I can't go out on stage like this." He's very worried. The end of the story is, yes, he got his eye open just fine with Sammy Davis, but for a couple of seconds there, it was panic. I can't get my eye open. So little things like that the world itself doesn't know about.
For
So
sure.
just keep it to yourself and everybody who's watching this.
Is there a drummer, Butch, who you have not met and wished that you had?
That's very good. Well, there's some of the drummers from so long ago, which these wonderful gentlemen are no longer here. I would have loved to have met Shadow Wilson, who was very instrumental with the Basie band back in the 40s. I knew Gus Johnson. I knew Gus, who was with Basie's small group when he dissolved the first band, and then when he put together the New Testament band, the second edition, in 51 or 52, and brought the big band back into being. Gus was a wonderful person and a wonderful drummer. But there was some of the drummers, some of the great bop drummers that I never had a chance to meet. Roy Haynes I've known for a long time. I knew Max a little bit. I knew Tony Williams a little bit. There were some other gentlemen, both in the swing era and the bop era, that I never met. Unfortunately, I really would like to. And some of the great traditional, the trad drummers, the Dixieland drummers that were there when the whole thing began. I would love to have known Baby Dodds. I don't know whether he was a nice guy or a real nasty or whatever. I have no idea. But I would love to have been able to pick his brains about a few folks and some other folks like that. I never had a chance to hang around, let's say, some of the great rock and roll drummers, John Bonham, bless his heart. I did meet John. I've got a great photo of the two of us arm in arm together, smiling like crazy for the camera. But I never had a chance to see him in person. I would have loved to. I knew Carmine, who's still around. Carmine, however you want to pronounce his last name, Apiche, however. I've never seen Carmen live. I've never seen some of these people live. I never saw Keith Moon live. I've never seen Ringo live. Charlie Watts, I know. I've seen Charlie live a number of times. Fortunately, I have a chance to talk with him, but some of the great jazz drummers and some of the truly great rockers I've never even seen perform live. And I feel like there's something I've missed. I really would love to see this and love to get with him and talk with him. Charlie's a funny type of guy. He loves jazz more than he loves almost anything. The last time we were together was at a big show that the Stones did when they came through Houston a few years ago. And we got, uh, sorry folks, but we got backstage passes. Thank you, Charlie. And we're backstage with everybody. They're all mingling and whatnot. And Charlie comes backstage before the show. So we have a chance to talk. And I've known this from experience for years. He would much rather talk about jazz than almost anything else on earth. Here's one of the greatest rock drummers in the world with the greatest down-home bar bands that ever existed. And he wants to talk about jazz. He's a lovely fellow, lovely man. So I can't get anything out of him about rock technique. He doesn't want to talk about rock and roll. He wants to talk about jazz. Bruce Weinstein, who was playing, or not
Phil, Phil.
Yes, thank you. You know, who working with the Boss. I've seen him live, fortunately, and I had a chance to talk a little bit with him. Same thing. He wants to talk about jazz. Doesn't want to talk about rock and roll. So I'm wondering. It's got me thinking, do they want to be rock drummers, but the money's too good? Do they want to be rock drummers? Do they want to be jazz drummers? Would they like to go out on the road with Willie Nelson? I've played with Willie, as a matter of fact, did a couple of shows, but that's another story. That'll be my second book. Really. But you know, you're right, Rabbi. If you can hang in long enough, and if you can get yourself in these good situations, you can wind up with a lot of nice stories. And I've got a lot of nice stories from a lot of nice people.
What is it about jazz, Butch, that appeals to these extraordinary rock drummers?
I think the way that I teach, many times a lot of the younger drummers would like to play rock, but they don't want to set a groove. They don't want to set something for the rest of the band to rely on and get into this groove like some of the great rock drummers will do. They'll lay down a particular rhythm that is so strong and so solid that the band can go anywhere and do anything musically that they want to. And many drummers, their minds are working so fast with things that they can play and that they want to play, they're too busy to lay down a groove. Jazz has a groove in a different place, as you very well know. Technique is well rewarded. Creativity is extremely well rewarded. If you play the same thing over and over and over, you don't get too much work in jazz because you've got to create out of nothing. An idea may lead to another idea. A clap of thunder during a Jerry Mulligan solo. That's what I'm talking about. That's what happens. And a drummer will hear something musically on stage and he'll react to it, action, reaction. And it's creativity right from the get-go. That is difficult. That is hard to do. That is rewarding, which is why you see me smiling so much and reacting with such great joy when something does go right. I've got a photo around the house somewhere. One time, I really wasn't happy with my particular performance one night with the Count Basie Band, and I'm sitting backstage, dressed in my Basie Band outfit, legs crossed like this, and I'm in deep sadness with what I'm doing because I really didn't accept it. Just, oh, this is awful. I'm just playing so bad. This is, oh, I can't, oh. But we turned it around the next set and I played pretty good. You have that chance. There are times with rock, you've got to set that groove, that funk, that style. If you change it too much, it throws the band itself off and the arrangement, the setting off. Jazz is almost like the old catch as catch can wrestling style. You act and you react off of what happens. And it's all about a lot of the creativity. You take your knowledge and your technique and you throw it out there without a whole lot of rehearsing. And sometimes it becomes magnificent. Sometimes it will fall flat on its face. You'll have a train wreck out there. And I've been involved in a few of those. Shh, don't call me Bonnie. Been involved in a few of those on recordings too, and I'm not going to tell you which ones. You'll just have to listen to all of them and find out. It's the difference in the style and the genre that makes it. Jazz is much more free flowing and of the moment. Rock is very well said. If you want that particular arrangement to go over the way that it should, you can open it up in some areas, but it's got to be really formalized and solidified here and here and here and here. So you've got that groove going. And there are drummers whose minds work so rapidly, it's almost impossible for them to get into a groove and continue to play the same thing over and over. It's difficult. One night I was in, here's another story. One night I was in Chicago with Mel Torme back in the early 70s. And we'd gone into a wonderful, wonderful club to hear Buddy Rich once again in the big band. And we're sitting in there. And Buddy saw Mel and me, and he called Mel up, come on, sit in, sing a tune or two. And Mel got up to sing something, and it was just going to be Buddy, the trio, and Mel. Buddy picked up a pair of sticks. I'm sorry, a pair of brushes. And Mel set the tempo, and they began to jam to create something out of nothing. Buddy Rich, the world's greatest technician, the world's greatest big band drummer, the world's greatest whatever you want in terms of drumming, laid down a very fine, gentle swing brush rhythm and continued to play that and continued to play that and continued to play that without interjecting any bombs, anything, any syncopations different, any type of triple fills or anything. It built and it built and it built and it swung like crazy. And I was holding on to the edge of the table thinking, I can't stand this. This is fantastic. This is swinging. It's swinging. It took us off. It's incredible. When is he going to do something like this? I go, oh, and he played the entire tune, nothing but the rhythm. And it was the most amazing thing I had ever heard in my life. No explosions, no dynamite blasts, no super speed around the drum set, just the rhythm. A lot of drummers can't do that. They can't. They can't play four measures without doing something, a little or whatever. They're not going to get ching, no. It's very tough to not play.
My teachers speak of their teachers who said the most of, when you can improvise on one note. So that's something that I've been taught also. And it's actually something that Ellis Marcellus of blessed memory, I was backstage once at Jazz Fest, and he was talking about playing on some pretty rickety pianos a long time ago in New Orleans that only had a couple of working keys. And you had to make a night of it. And he said that's how he learned how to do his thing. So that's very deep.
I believe it. We did a job one time in New Jersey. I'll never forget it. Some club, a favor to a friend again, basically the whole band. And we went in and the piano was a disaster. Exactly what you're talking about. He still made it work. He was asked on a TV show one time, what happens if you get in and the piano just doesn't play? He says, well, I know which ones to play. I know which notes to play. I just needed a couple up here, just a few up on top, and it'll be okay. And I was in situations where the piano was like that, and it was okay. Basie could do that, and I'm sure Ellis could do that. The great ones know where they can get away with it. What's going to work? But you're absolutely right.
What advice might you have for some up and coming drummers who might be listening to the big band and hearing the lost art as you suggested, and also some of the music that you mentioned before that you're interested in but are looking to background yourself in, what advice might you have for somebody who's got so much to choose from?
Well, yeah, the beauty of it is that they do have so much to choose from. Uh, Go with your heart. Where your heart leads you, you've got to follow that. Just because somebody that you really like plays a certain style, a certain way, and it's not really enough to copy them and to play like them, unless that's what you really, 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 really want. You know, I've been accused of playing so much like Buddy Rich all my life, and it's true. It's absolutely true. But I wanted to play like that. I love the style. I love the sound. I love the whole genre. And it was just my choice. Do what you feel you have to do. If you love it, play it. If you don't, but you're doing it because you admire someone who does it, you'll never play it as well as they will. Anybody that copies somebody else is never going to be better than the original, even if you've got so much more technique. I know guys who can, you know, outplay me 8 days through Sunday. But if I come up with the idea and all they do is copy what I just played, then they're not creating anything. I'm not saying what I'm creating is magnificent or anything either, but it is my idea and what I've come up with and what I'm playing, spur of the moment because I love it. And as you said earlier, it shows on my face. I do love it.
It's quite remarkable and quite a beautiful role modeling. Even watching you on video is to inspire one's joy within, and to be able to be joyful in all kinds of circumstances is a rare art. So I think that's really beautiful. So thank you for that. I want to maybe one last question, and
Okay.
it's the last. You said you've been in the Austin area for roughly 20 years or so.
Uh-huh. Yep.
So, do you have any thoughts about the Austin community, the Austin jazz community, where it's been, where it is, where it's going? Just you're sort of an elder statesman in this wonderful community.
Are you trying to tell me that I'm old?
I'm just going off what you've been saying. You've got lots of opportunities to develop secret spices and urban spices. You got lots of
Now you're making me hungry. I think I'll get in the car and see if any place is open around here. Actually, um, Mike Mordecai is to blame for some of this. When we first moved into Austin, I had lived many years. I lived 15 years in and around New York City, and I'm a New York drummer. You know, um, played a couple of gigs here, a couple of gigs there. That place isn't there anymore. Stuff, whatever. It's like when you talk to a New Yorker, you have to talk in the accent, or they don't understand you.
which I totally understand. I totally get it. Believe me.
But forget about it. So we moved. I moved to uh, Austin, and Austin had quite a rep. Still does have quite a reputation for musicians, for artists, for a lot of different people. And I was trying to get some ideas of where all the music was. And we had heard about the Elephant Room. And so my wife and I had gone down there one night. I believe that it was Monday night. Somebody had said, we'd run into somebody who said, yeah, they have jam sessions down there on Monday nights. So, well, let's go down. I'm not a big fan of jam sessions, but let's go down and see what's going on. And that's where we first, I think that might be where we first met Mike Mordecai. It's a lot of my brain has been going away in bits and chunks over the years to where I remember things like it happened 14 minutes ago. Then there are other things. I have a vague gray painting in the back of my mind of what might have happened, but I'm not really sure. So um, anyway, met Mike Mordecai and he introduced us to a number of musicians. And he said, you got to come down for this, you got to come down for this and that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, yeah, well, here we go. New York musician. I'm in Austin, Texas. Austin's got all this reputation. What am I going to find down here? I don't know. Is it jazz music? I mean, come on, you know, you got to sleep at the wheel. As little did I know Ray Benson, who's a friend of mine. Did I know Ray? Well, listen, that's another story. But anyway, so we go to the Elephant Room, and it's a jam session night, and people are getting up and they're playing and they're burning, and I am impressed. I'm thinking, who are these people? And you got folks standing up there. Tony Campese, God bless his soul, bless his heart. He's up there working. He's playing so hard. You got John Blondell, who's all over the place. He's putting every trombone player to shame with what that man could do. You got John Frinkin on the bass. You got Jeff Helmer on the piano. These two guys killed me immediately. As a matter of fact, the first time I ever sat down to work with those two guys, we fit together like we've been playing together for 30 years, and that's almost never happened to me. It will happen sometimes, but it was very rare. And the musicianship that I heard in Austin and in going to some of the clubs and a number of the clubs back then and then later on, with Chris Kimura's place, Parker, and some of the other jazz clubs, was just outstanding. And the musicians who you've got guys of John Mills, who teaches at UT, who will turn around and play whatever you want to hear. He might go out on the road with some progressive country and western. And then he'll turn around and go with the dirtiest blues band you ever heard in life. And then they'll get some experimental octet or tentet pieces going that he'll write. And you're thinking, where are these people coming from? They're here in Austin. The artistry of so many of these folks and the brilliance of so many of these creative artists is just wonderful. And it's pretty much like centered in the Austin and surrounding area. Of course, right now, the problem is that we have the pandemic, excuse me, give me another cup of coffee, going, and there's just no place to go and work. That'll change, I hope. But there's a lot of things going on in the creativity and the artistry of these particular great artists will not be diminished in any way. It's just placed on hold for a little while. And then it'll come back and it'll make itself very well known. In the meantime, there's a whole slew of others who are coming along. They just need places to perform and places to play and get their music and their sound out. We just have to wait a little while. So I know they're coming. What was it that Satchel Paige, the great old, wonderful ball player, the pitchers, that he said, don't ever look over your shoulder because there might be somebody right behind you. And this is true, especially with musicians and other artists. If you think you're the best in your league and the best in your field and the best of everything, just don't look over your shoulder. They're out there and they're coming. And they should be. It's jazz. That's all I got to say.
Butch, this has been a delightful, delightful conversation. And I really appreciate your humor, your joy. You obviously speak just like you play drums and vice versa with a verve that's really beautiful. So I appreciate.
I've really enjoyed it. This has been lovely, lovely
Thank you.
conversation.
Do you have anything you want to add or speak about before we take off?
No, I figure about now people are pretty tired of this, of hearing me drone on and drone on. But I just want to say that whatever the creative, yeah, the creativity that's going on in the artistry in Austin and surrounding areas, if you are a member of that, keep on keeping on, just like Clark Terry said, because there will be places to play, there will be audiences to hear, and there's always the music that will challenge you. It's never all that easy, but it sure is fun.
Well, thank you, Butch, and may you have continued bursts of creative thunder to play off of, and good health, and continue to see the world and travel to familiar places and go back to those places in Italy, as well as go to wonderful places that you haven't yet seen. So with respect and appreciation, thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I've had a wonderful time.